Hey guys, Bart here. Welcome to TST Garage. In this episode, we're gonna travel back in time a little bit. Behind me, you'll see a stockish looking Honda CBR1000RR. This is the Fireblade from the generation of 2008 to 2011. They did have small nuances between 08, 09, and then the 10, 11 years, but they're not significant enough for what we're gonna be doing here today. I have the pleasure of introducing to you on video our UTKX system for this bike. It is a carbon fiber undertail, real pressure cured carbon fiber, really nice, cut precisely to fit within the undertail geometry there. It has this boss that's adhered to it. This is an injection molded component. We made that in injection molding on purpose to have really tight tolerances so that our taillight lines up with these bosses and then subsequently lines up with the OEM geometry of the fairing so that we could screw this together without having to make any modifications to the bike. The taillight itself is an integrated taillight. It has the signals already included on board here. It is a really cool look. It's got a ducted lens. This particular one is smoked. You'll also see on our website that we do sell a clear version if that's what tickles your fancy. Our taillights always come pre-wired for plug-and-play connectivity, so no worries there. Like I said, we don't want to modify this bike. We just want to throw these parts on and enjoy our ride. We also include this nice billet aluminum CNC machined bracket system for your license plate. When you remove all this stuff, you have to remount your license plate. The actual subframe of this bike does have this joining hump or boss, whatever you want to call it. What we do is superimpose this over this boss and use the provided hardware to get that on there, and this is where your license plate will sit. Now, we've also come up with a version that doesn't have this T-cut and does not provide a way for this hump to come out. This is what we like to call a customizer special. It does require an aftermarket subframe or heavy modifications to the subframe. We will not be showing you how to install that. That is very involved. We do not want to take responsibility for somebody performing these modifications. So if you do decide to go that route, make sure that whoever is installing it, whether it's you or a shop, you guys are the ones that are claiming responsibility for the modification. If you're not up to the task, I recommend just going with the simple, nice version that we're going to show you how to install here. Anyway, this is 08 to 11, right? The 2012 to 2016 model was very similar. The bodywork was just a little bit different. I know somebody's going to ask, can I mount this system on the 2012 and up? The answer is yes. However, you will have to change the tail fairing and also this fairing to the previous generation version, and that will look like this. You will need to get these two fairing pieces. They come together here and accept our undertail, and this mounts to the subframe exactly the same as you'll see on this model. The subframe on these bikes is exactly the same from 08 to 16, so no worries there. The only difference is these components here. This undertail, the black undertail here, comes out and doesn't get reused. You replace the fairings with these and you're good to go. You basically follow the same instructions as I have here and we'll be showing you in this video. That's pretty much all I have to say about the attributes of this system. I do want to make you aware that this is a very low volume production system here, sort of an exclusive kit. Is not really meant for everyone, so we really batch manufacture about 20 at a time. So if you find that we're out of stock for a couple of weeks, don't worry, drop your email in the notification box, and as soon as it's back in stock, we'll shoot you an email and you'll be able to get it yourself. All right, let's get started. I'm dying to show you guys how awesome this thing looks and how it transforms the tail end of this bike into a true race inspired look. So let's get going, come on. In step one, we will be removing the seats. This particular bike has a seat cowl, comes off the same as a seat, just doesn't have any components for supporting a rider. To remove the driver's seat, we need to peel this panel up, rotate it about a hinge point here. I like to use a spring puller right around here to pull up on it. Makes it easy. I've also done it with just bare fingers in the past. You rotate it about this piece here and take it out, good to go. That exposes a 5mm Allen screw here. We'll take that out. And then we just repeat this process on the left side of the bike. And now the driver's seat can come up and out of the way. Now we have these 4 fasteners here on the tail. They are also 5mm. These fasteners come out. The tail is actually free of mechanical fasteners. If we pull it back, we clear our interference tabs from the slots here in this fairing. I'll show you guys externally. You pull back on this, you disengage these guys. So they'll need to come to here, get disengaged, and then we need to stretch the tail fairing around the subframe and the other components. So first make sure that they're actually disengaged, and then we'll start stretching. Now that we have the fairing out, we can trace the wires from the tail light and also from the fender lighting components through the sub tray down the middle all the way to this compartment here. And here we will have one of these white plugs that has 3 conductors going through it. This is your tail light plug, has a little tab, pry up on, disengage it, and that can just come up this way. There are a number of cable routing guides here, cable management system. On this particular bike, this is pretty loose. On most bikes, it will still be routed fairly tightly in there, so just work it out and you'll be good to go. So the Fender lighting system has a sub harness that terminates in the plugs that we need to plug our new taillight into inside this Fender. So there's one main plug for this sub harness that sits here. This is where your servo connects to. You have your fuse panel here, and this 4 conductor guy that has orange, blue, brown, and green. This is what we need to take out. And we take it out now to drop it with the fender, but this will go back in after we extract it from the fender. So this will also likely be routed through a bunch of cable management clips on your bike. On this particular bike, it's not. I have cleared the wire for the tail light. I'm going to take that out now. And here I'm going to use a 10mm socket. There are 3 10mm head screws that hold this guy to the undertail. This is for the 10 to 11 model. The pre-2010 model has this whole undertail in 2 pieces, so you won't be able to take off the fender. You'll basically just take this whole thing down, and you'll see how to do that in the next step that I'm going to show you. So this is the sub harness that needs to come out. To remove this guy from this whole assembly, we'll need to take this screw out, this screw, this nut, and then be able to gain access under here and just unplug the signals and unplug your license plate light, and then this will just come out. We actually have this covered in a different video that we've shot on a 2008 through 16 actually model for the installation of our regular integrated taillight. So if you guys need those details, please see that video. This is pretty redundant and easy, so we'll just pull it out off camera. Next, we will be taking off this bracket via the removal of these 4 8mm head fasteners. That gains us access to these 2 screws. However, they're pretty off axis here. I could get a small flathead around that Phillips head fastener. And since it's so off axis, it's really awkward to actually turn it. Now, once we take that off, take those 2 fasteners off, this undertail will come out. We are not reusing this part, so we don't have to worry about putting those screws back in. Those screw into these rear bosses on the lower fairing here, and this fairing remains in place with these fasteners in. So we really just have to worry about removing them. So I'm gonna work on them with my flathead and maybe with the help of this makeshift tool using a Phillips bit and my locking plier. For an actual proper dismantle here, we would have to remove so many different components, take the battery out. A lot of this stuff would have to come up and lift off because it really is under the subframe. So we'll have to really drop everything. Since we're not reusing this, this is a lot simpler, just doing it little by little with tools that will just get us by. All right, now we have this undertail free from this forward fairing. There are 4 more fasteners here and here. Fastener heads are from the bottom. We will need 5mm, I believe. Oh, 5mm Allen. Once we take these out, this undertail should pretty much just drop off. So we'll have to support it underneath so it doesn't drop onto any other surfaces. There's a locking tab here that this needs to come out of. So we just rotate it down a little bit and pull it backwards, and now we're good to go. This is the fairing that I took off that bike just now. As you can see, it is ready to get our undertail inserted into it. We do have to prep these rubber dampers for the acceptance of these tabs. I'll show you how I made them fit on this particular fairing. I just cut away little windows in here so that the tabs can fit in there. If you don't do that, this still seemingly fits. You could just jam it in there and it'll kind of hold, but over time it'll create a gap, and then you'll notice that you have unsightly gaps along these edges, and you probably won't like that very much. So this is really the only part that needs small modification in this entire process. And if for some reason you're going back to stock at some point, you just take it out, reverse it, put it back in, and you're good to go. There's just a little window that is really not seen from the outside in there. So let's do this. Let's fit our undertail in there the way it's meant to fit. It's very simple to figure out. The outer contour matches the inner contour of the fairing, and the tabs just tab in between that rubber piece and our undertail. So move this out just a little bit. mark our rubber pieces. I've got a little bit of marker on my paint. I'm going to use denatured alcohol to remove it before it sets. No harm, no foul. Good to go. All right, let's slip these rubber guys off. And now we'll just cut away a little window. We'll try this with some scissors first because that's usually the easiest way to do it. Then I'm going to use a utility knife to cut the spine in half. And there we go. We just reapply it where that came from. As you can see, there's a shorter and a longer portion. So we just have to make sure that it's in the right position. As you can see here, I did one at a time. I have a longer one in the trailing edge, shorter one in the leading edge. I'm just going to repeat this procedure on the left side. All right, let's get this put back on the bike and continue over on the bike. Before we get the actual tail fairing on, we need to replace this bracket that we took out for access to our Phillips screws. Now the fairing can go back on. This will be basically the reverse order of this assembly. And to get it around one side, stretch it over the other, making sure to get the tab engagement right between these two panels, and then we'll be golden. All right, things are looking sweet. I'm gonna leave everything loose for now. We still need to fit our TST components in here. We'll have to remove this bolt. The removal of this joining bolt requires a 12mm socket. This does not get reused. We provide a longer bolt with washers and nuts. Let's see, everything's looking good. We'll have to prep our taillight and the fasteners for assembly. Now I've stretched out the wires already. These guys are ready to go here. We just need to find proper routing. Once this is in here, it'll look like this. And this wire needs to get routed through the undertail section to the back here where it's going to plug in. On a lot of these bikes, you don't have this sort of a cowl. You have a passenger seat. Now, if you have a passenger seat, it will have standoffs that make contact with the subframe for support. This wire has to be routed in a way that dodges all of those contact points. So I think what I'm going to do is route it around the top and zip tie it off. I've made that plan. I'll show you guys how to do that a little bit later. Now this is already in position, and I just want to show you guys something really quickly. When this light fits in, you can see we molded in these mounting ears that line up with this. So all of the OEM mounting areas are preserved. And then on this side, you just mount into this boss. So let's get that done. We'll need to grab our hardware kit, check out the contents. You'll see these two black fasteners that are meant to be inserted over this boss. You can see there's one protruding end that has threads in it that has to go inside on the bottom. So just a hole on top, threads on the bottom. Make sure you bottom that out and center it forward and aft. Find another one of these guys. Repeat the procedure. If they're a little bit loose on this boss, you can clamp them down with pliers. You'll need them to stay put. It makes the rest of the installation a lot easier. Now the rest of this stuff, you have a countersunk screw with a finishing washer that will go from the top. We'll couple these fasteners up with their washers ready for insertion. And now we'll just need to get all of these tabs to tab in while gently flexing the system, making sure we don't scratch paint. The T-slot passes around this big hump. All right, once all the tabs are in, I'm going to push my tail fairing in so that it's concentric with all of the fastening features that I described and showed you between the undertail, taillight, and the top fairing, making sure all of my gaps are right. We'll use this fastener pair that we prepared before through these holes. Need a 3mm Allen. I'm just going to get the thread engaged, but not tighten it down all the way yet. I want to make sure that my forward mounts, the stock mounts from which we took out those 5mm Allen head fasteners are aligned, and make sure that we have the ability to fasten that down. In fact, they are concentric, so we're ready to go. I'm going to fasten these guys down, and then we'll talk about some wiring. At this point, you can fasten down the rear fasteners all the way. Probably don't want to over tighten them. You are going onto plastic. You don't want to strain it. That looks pretty good to me. It looks proper. All right, let's go do some wiring. Let's get this wiring over to this forward compartment. There's a hole in the wall here meant for routing wires through. This is where our tail light, our fender wiring came through. So let's get that through to this area here. We have a 3-conductor plug, blue, yellow, and black wire that goes into our main taillight connector here. Gets tucked away down here somewhere. We'll neaten that up in a little bit. And now we have our signal connectors. I spoke earlier about removing the sub harness from the fender. This is that sub harness. It's missing the license plate light plug. I've capped it off. We're going to do something else about the license plate light here. These are our signal connections. I'm going to plug this back into where it came out of. And now I'm going to kick this thing on, get it on signaling left, and I'm going to make sure I have the right connector in left and right harness connection. So brown to blue, green to orange, good to go. Now we have excess here, so we're gonna have to stow it. I do like to make this as neat as possible. Many places where you could route it so that it becomes captive. I'm gonna keep my license plate light wires out. I'm gonna do that later. Now, like I said before, we need to make sure that if you have a seat on this bike and not a cowl, that the seat where it contacts here and other locations, it does make contact with the wire. Making contact with the wire, with the seat, somebody on it will grind through the wires, short them, and you'll pop a fuse. Some people choose to replace that fuse with a 30 amp fuse, and then the bike catches fire. You don't want that, so let's route it properly. Make use of 2 small wire ties through these unused now holes. Leave some play. Now, if you jam that wire aft of this bracket and then keep it tight here against the fairing and cinch it down tight, that won't move and won't get in the way of those seat standoffs. And here, that's just another precaution. I'm going to cut off the excess and that'll be done. Now we can move on to the license plate bracket. For the remainder of this process, we will need this long M8 bolt, its locking nut, the 2 washers. Those will lock these components onto the bike and also lock the subframe together so that it is fastened together like it was from the factory, right through this hump portion. So I know on the table, I showed you guys this license plate bracket already built. This was for demonstration purposes. This is actually how it arrives to you. There's a few pieces that need to be built together, but it's really simple and I'll show you how to do it. Let's start by putting one of the washers onto our bolt. And if you take a look at this hump, one side has a through hole and the other side has the threads, right? So we need to go through the through hole. You need to select the appropriate L bracket for that. Now we want our license plate sitting this way, so we will select this bracket to be on this side. We'll feed the bolt through that whole thing. I'm going to grab a 6mm Allen to help myself along here. Now, since I am going into a threaded boss on the other side of this hump, once I tighten this down, that'll be it. So I'm just going to put it into a position where I think this will be good, and we'll readjust later based on what we observe. Now we have the other side bracket that goes on the protruding portion here. Bottom it out. The other big washer, and then we have our locking nut. So we'll take a 13mm socket or an open-ended. I'm going to start with an open-ended here. Just trying to be really, really careful not to scratch up my nice new carbon. Okay, leave a little bit of adjustability, and that's pretty good. Now we can get our flat bracket built on top of this. We have 3 holes on each side. We're going to make use of the middle hole. We will put the countersunk screw in from the outside. It does receive a locking nut from the inside. Make sure you get the flange on towards the flat surface that it's fastening against. These I'll get on by hand first and then use tools. Here I'm going to use an 8mm box wrench from the back on the nut, a 3mm Allen from the outside. So the L bracket that we're fastening onto does have a slot. We're able to fine-tune the position. So what I'd like to do is make sure that I'm centered on the L brackets, and then I tighten down all the way. All right, now this is adjustable, but I pretty much know exactly what angle I like my license plate on. So I'm gonna set it to that angle right away. If you guys feel like you need to fine tune afterwards, all the hardware is still accessible, so that's a nice little asset. You could always change your license plate angle if you wish to do so. I'm gonna use a 13mm socket on this side while holding my bolt from this side with my 6mm Allen. Finalize that tightening, and this is good to go. We can mount a license plate on here if you wish to do so. We do have an add-on license plate light. The reason it's an add-on, a lot of people don't go for it. They don't want it on there. They don't want the extra cumbersome connections. We highly advise that you guys use one if you're gonna be running around the streets. But that's a separate installation video that we do have on our channel, so you can check that out. It's really simple. Just route the wire, clamp the license plate to the light, good to go. All right, let's button this thing up. Let's take a look. Everything's looking good. Now it is flashing a bit fast. It's not super fast. These bikes tend to go into hyper flash if you don't have a means of compensating for the lower current drawn by the LED signals. That just means you'll probably need an LED flasher relay, which we do have for this bike, and we do have a separate video showing that. Check that out on our website, tsdindustries.com. We do have those videos ready for you, or even on our YouTube channel. All right, let's get the seats on and we'll be done. That's it. All right, we're done. If I'm not yapping, this process takes me about 15 to 20 minutes. Now I had to show you guys how to do it and explain adequately, so it took a little bit longer, but as you can see, in just, under an hour, I've transformed the tail of this bike from the bulbous, weird taillight, fat, humpy looking thing to this race-inspired version with a nice carbon fiber finish and billet aluminum parts. Really, really cool. I hope you agree. Now, I'll have to put this license plate light on and then put the license plate on this thing, and then it'll be ready to rip. So, if you like what you see here, check out tsdindustries.com. We have a bunch of parts for this bike and other bikes that you may have in your stable. I think you'll like what we have. If this attests to our design abilities, you came to the right place. Ride safe, and I hope to see you at TSD Industries. Bye.